Worship leaders, worship musicians, and those who love to worship. Have you ever wondered what a musical director does with a band? And how is that different from a worship leader? Or maybe you're a player and you've seen musical directors, doling out parts and doing things during rehearsals that just seem to tighten up the band and you want to do that someday. How does that work? Well, let's talk about it. Welcome to the Worship Homestead. My name is Nathan Smith. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be talking about what a musical director is, what they do, and if you want to be one, how you would prepare for a service differently than if you were just a bass player or a guitar player or even a worship leader. But first, I want to give you something. If you go to my website, blueprintsounds.com, you can get access to my free worship training bundle called the Worship Booster Pack. It has PDFs and online classes for everything from songwriting to how to build a better band, the 5 elements of a full-sounding worship team, and much more. All of that is available for free if you just go to my website, blueprintsounds.com, or you can click on the link nearby, blueprintsounds.com/worship booster pack. All right, let's talk about a musical director. So I was recently invited to a church by a worship leader who wanted to do a little bit bigger production than she normally does with her church. So we invited extra players, but she needed help because she also had a choir that she was leading, and it just felt like too heavy of a lift to try and do everything all at once, which is true. When you're doing a bigger production, you need a team to help make it happen. So the setup was we have a drummer, bass player, electric guitar player, acoustic guitar player, that was me, and also leading a song or two, and then a choir, a piano player, and then my friend, the worship leader. Well, she wanted me to be the musical director, and here's the difference between the musical director and the worship leader. She remained the worship leader, and she had the big picture for how she wanted the weekend to go. But when I mean big picture, it's everything from the service to, feeding the musicians during the rehearsal and getting the choir on and off stage. She had a lot to think about. She was also working with the sound techs. So there was a lot on her plate. What she wanted to take off of her plate and give to me was the vision, the strategy of how to get those songs played by the band. Right? So I really was taking care of the band and she leaned more heavily into the choir. So I want to share with you 3 things that a musical director does differently from just a normal musician, a guitar player that's being brought in to help out on a Sunday morning. And that has to do with preparation, the rehearsal, and then the actual service. So let's start with preparation. When I was listening to the songs, and there were a couple that I didn't know, I'm listening deeply on different systems. Sometimes I'm listening on my speakers, but I'm also listening on headphones because you get a different quality of sound and certain instruments pop out differently when you're listening on different systems. I'm listening for the 5 elements of a full-sounding worship team. I'm not only concerned about the acoustic guitar, which is, of course, what I'm playing. Where do I strum? Where do I finger pick? Where do I not strum? That would be, if I was just the acoustic, I might be only concerned about that. But as a musical director, I have to think about how all of the parts fit together and how they work. So, again, the 5 parts are the drums and the bass together making what's called the groove. The next is pads, and that's long tones, organ, cello, things like that. The main rhythmic instrument, and in this case it was the acoustic guitar. Arpeggios, and that's done by the electric guitar often, especially in modern worship. And the holds, which is the body, which is often done by a piano. So those are your 5 elements. Again, if you want more information on how those elements work together, you go to that worship booster pack I was talking about earlier. So as musical director, I'm listening to those 5 elements in the song. I'll put on my headphones, close my eyes. I'm not looking around. I'm just listening. Okay, how are those elements coming together? What is the kick drum doing? Is the bass matching the kick drum? Well, probably. Let's check on that. From section to section on the drums, are they doing like a tom groove? Is it a straight ahead kick, hi-hat, snare thing? Or is the drummer playing on the ride during the chorus? I want to answer all of those questions beforehand because the drums make a big difference in the arrangement of the song. What the song is going to feel like is very different if the drummer's on toms or if the drummer's on a ride cymbal. So even though I don't play drums very well at all, I know enough to know well, this is the job during this section. If we want this section to feel like the bridge, the drummer's going to have to do X, Y, and Z so that I can check on that during the rehearsal. So I do that for all of the elements of the team. They don't all need the same amount of attention. Oftentimes I'll turn my attention to the drums first because the drums really do steer the ship. But I'll take care of my own instrument. I'm going to listen to the drums and how the bass and the drums work together. But then I'm also going to listen to those other elements like the piano. Does the piano have a really interesting lick that's sort of important to the song? And what I'm trying to answer as I listen through the song is not just what parts are being played. I'm listening for what makes the song work. Because from song to song, different elements are going to be the hero. Everyone should have time to shine during the song at some point. That's one of the signs of a good arrangement, is that you don't have to hear everything all at once. But throughout the song, you want, oh, hey, the pads are coming forward. Or, oh, that was a really cool piano line. Or I can really hear the acoustic on this section. Or during a big chorus, wow, those drums and bass sound amazing. They don't all have to hit it out of the park at the same time, and probably they shouldn't, and they can't. But you do want to give everybody a chance to shine so that we hear each element of the band at some point in the song. So for the first song, the song was really about big drums and electric guitars. Okay, easy, just make it rock. The second song, as I was listening to it, had a lot of air in it, a lot of electric guitars doing spacey, delays and reverbs, very popular. But then as I was listening to the song again, I noticed that with all that air, all that space that the piano and the guitar were leaving, there was a shaker in there. I was like, oh, that's interesting. That shaker's really helpful for keeping the rhythm on this really open, airy song. And that became important later on. The third song was just a great gospel groove that had a lot of interlinking parts. The bass was doing one thing, but it fit in with what the guitar was doing and the piano. Gospel grooves are great for that. So keep tabs on that. And then on the fourth song, it was interesting. The band was important, but the most important part of that song was actually the interplay between the harmony and the melody of the song. They switched places, they wove together, they took turns. There was a really interesting dynamic between the melody and the harmony. So in that case, the most important thing about that fourth song was actually the harmony, and the band was just there to help out, really. So that's what I'm listening to during my preparation time. I've got my charts out. I'm making sure that the charts match where they don't match. And one of the songs, I made my own chart that made more sense to me so that it matched the song better. And I'm calling the worship leader. I'm asking questions that I know are going to come up later on during rehearsal. I want to already have the answer to those questions. So I'm trying to anticipate as much as I can what are going to be the sticking points. What questions do we need to answer now, a week out, before we get into rehearsal? So those are all the things you do during preparation. You want to take responsibility to understand the song, not just the hits. Of course, we need to know when is the band out, when is the band in, when do we drop down, when do we get big. That's important. But you need to know what's the song about. The next step is the actual rehearsal. So what I'm doing during rehearsal is I want to be so comfortable in what I'm doing, the singing and the playing, that I have time during the song to put myself on autopilot and start listening to the band and checking in with, hey, how are the drums doing? How's the electric guitar? Is it sounding like what I expected from the album? And when it's not, how can we change things? So a couple of examples. On one of the songs, that airy song didn't have the shaker element, right? The drummer didn't have that piece of percussion. And I'm wondering, if everybody leaves space, we're going to lose time and it's not going to have the same feel that the song should have. So I just made the decision. Usually the acoustic would be a little bit further back, but I'm going to give a little bit more rhythm to make up for that shaker that we don't have because we need that element there. On another song, that gospel tune, there's this really cool electric guitar part that has a wah pedal going on and it has this very iconic sound. It was definitely important to the groove, but our guitar player didn't have a wah pedal and we didn't have time to change that. So I had to listen and think about the groove again and go, piano player, can you play your part? So she plays her part. It's this awesome hook. It's really cool. So instead, we built the song around the piano part rather than building it around the electric guitar part that we didn't have. So thinking on the fly, all right, let's start. Piano player, just play your section. All right, drums come in, bass come in, electric, let's find another thing for you to do. And then I'll find something to do with the acoustic guitar part. So it still had the same spirit, that had that same gospel vibe, even though we weren't doing it exactly like the record. We had to, think on the fly and change it up and find the thing that we could make the song about. It wasn't going to be the electric guitar, but we could make that song about the piano. And then throughout each one of those songs, I'm listening for things that maybe the band didn't grab because maybe they weren't listening to the song as deeply as I had. So if there was a hit that we missed, oh, okay, band, let's go and make sure that we grab that. Or, hey, we need to come up in this section of the bridge, or we need to hold it down here so that we've got places to go to. As we're playing through, I'm singing and playing, but I'm also listening to the band, behind me, thinking, I got to address that. I got to address that. Let's tighten that up. Let's practice that. Sometimes it was if I couldn't remember, I had to walk off stage while we had a break, listen to the primary source, listen to my phone, listen to that track again, be like, okay, now I remember what's happening in that section. That's what I'm thinking about as I'm going through the song, is making sure that we get close to what we were shooting for. And if there's something that's not happening, tighten that up. Tighten that up, tighten that up, polish it up, do it a few times if you need to, move on to the next section. And finally, the service. When it comes time for service, I tend to reinforce everything that I was talking about with my body. So from the outside, just a casual observer might look at me and say, wow, he was really playing. He had a lot of stage presence. He was moving around. He was kind of dancing. My wife, who was at the service, knows that I was actually directing the band with my body. So with my head, I'm constantly tapping my foot. From one section to the next, if there's a change, I'm looking over and I'm making eye contact with my drummer or my bass player, letting them know, yep, this is it. This is when we're going to change. Or my headstock, the neck on my guitar, will come down and hit on the important hits so that everybody has something to look at. It's actually a very, very physical thing when you're leading a band. You want to make sure that everybody knows, eye contact, watch me, I know where we're going, and here's where we're going. That, it looks cool, but that's not really the point. The point is we have to stay together. And if everybody can cue off of my confidence that I know what comes next, then it'll work. Since I'm also singing, I will purposefully step back from the mic during interludes so that guys know, well, this is not a verse. And then I will step up to the mic when it's time for a verse or a chorus so that people know, oh, this is the next section. All of those little maneuvers help the band to get confident and also relax. They're like, okay, we know where we are. I know that this verse is next, and I know that because Nathan is stepping up to the mic and he's about to sing it, and he was back from the mic beforehand. So all of that is part of what being a musical director is. You do extra preparation that other people didn't do beforehand because they didn't have to worry about it. Well, you do. You need to go and track down all of those answers beforehand, even if that means making your own chart. Because on one of those charts that I made, I ended up making copies for the rest of the band because my chart was more useful than the one that they had. So you do all that beforehand. But during the rehearsal, you're not only thinking about how can we play just like the album, you want to think about how can we make it feel like the song should feel. And if we need to switch it up in real time, then we need to find a creative solution for a problem. And then when it comes time for service, you are the one who is leading, right? So you have to have that confidence of, I know that we're on this section, I know that we're on this section, and I'm going to show you with my mannerisms, with my body, that we're moving from one place to the next. I took a good nap after that service, but it's worth it because that's the joy of being a musical director, is that everybody won. Everybody in the band and the choir, they did the best job that they could during that service, and we had a fantastic service. And of course, the congregation is very thankful. You get the pleasure of knowing not that you were the star, you get the pleasure of knowing that you made your band better. And that's really what a musical director does, is they are that team captain that makes their band better. Hey, I hope that video helps you. And if you need help with arrangements or songwriting or church sound, click on the link nearby, blueprintsounds.com/worship booster pack. Until next week, God bless and goodbye.